I like to tell people like journaling is a really big process because it's a way that our mirror neurons can really clearly totally register and work out what's going on. So when we just have like our thoughts going haywire and like blah, blah, blah and stuff moving all over, journaling is a really beautiful way to ground and start to me, it's like long division.
Welcome to the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As a leading manifestation advisor with a process that's, well, radically different from the old New Age model, mine is rooted in psychology, neuroscience, and my energetic gifts. I created this podcast to help you expand your subconscious limiting beliefs about the potential of deserving the manifestations you're calling in. Therefore, you're tuning into this podcast series to show your subconscious that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, you've already started the process of manifesting it. If you enjoy this episode, please leave us a review, comment, and share it with your fellow manifestor that's struggling or could really benefit from the information that you're about to learn. Yay, we're officially in spring. We had that equinox last Sunday. So we're here. Can you feel it in the air? I mean, you all live in different places, but even in Topanga, I'm feeling it, that crispness in the evening. And there's a lot more of the marine layer coming up. And right now we're actually building a guest unit. It's not like we're doing it super hippie style. So it's not like a full blown, the whole thing. It's actually two kind of small houses, one for the living area and then one that'll be the bedroom that really faces the mountain. And we're doing it on the super cheap to have somewhere to live while we're remodeling the actual house. And there's going to be a whole outdoor bathroom, kind of like what we have at the house up north. So like outdoor clawfoot and all of that. And so I've been spending a lot of time out there. It's been my reprieve. And I can feel that crispness. Max and I have taken up the new habit that at 6:30 every morning, we head down to the beach and then we take the two pups totally illegally. We like run them over the sand before any of the lifeguards get there. And we walk on the beach with each other. He and Marigold tend to jog, but I bring my bathing suit every day. So I feel so good because every single day, if you haven't listened to that episode with Maggie Harson, who it's way back, it's such an important good one, how she healed every single autoimmune disease that she had and ailment in her body. And we go really in depth with sun gazing, nature, literally free healing. And so I'm out there barefoot every day and I wear layers and then I start to peel them back as the sun comes out more and more and I sun gaze. I'm barefoot in the wet sand, and then I try to get totally down to my bathing suit and cold plunge, although sometimes it makes me a little too vata. So if I know I'm going to be way too cold and it's going to kind of crack me out a little bit, I stop and I just stay in my layers and sun gaze and have parts of my body exposed. But that really has been setting the tone for everything. So when we arrive there, you can see the moon entirely still right over the ocean. So whatever phase it's at. And then you have the sun rising. And then it's just us. I don't know how to explain it, but it's been magic. I can really feel the season. I can't wait to see how that goes for the rest of the year. And it just feels like a deep connection with the season, the earth, the seasonal changes, the elements, the water. And then I pop back up. I used to be a pretty big surfer. Well, not a huge surfer. I used to surf and I had a board and all of that I learned in Santa Cruz when I was young because my grandparents had a house there. And I think my ex has my board still. But I have to admit, I'm actually afraid of the water now. I mean, it's been probably 6 years since I've surfed. So this is sort of my medicine. It feels like it used to feel when you pop down to the water, you surf, and then you come back up and it's like your whole day is made. This is my medicinal version of that without being afraid in the water. I do have to get back out there with some surfer friends and get over my fear. Max makes fun of me because I don't tend to go past the break. I don't know what happened. This was a few years ago. I got got afraid somehow, but that's been my total medicine. And I just feel so connected to all of the elements lately. And it's funny, I think everybody's experiencing these elements differently in different areas because I can feel the crispness here much more. I mean, in Echo Park, you're really removed from that. And we're building these super hippie style small house guest unit on our property that we'll live in while the actual home is being remodeled. And I'm getting to design it from scratch with hand makers that are making it. And we're doing it on like the real budget. So this weekend I get to go out to my favorite places, which are Pasadena Architectural Salvage, to go start salvaging all of the antique windows and doors and clawfoot tub and the old farm sinks. And then we have another spot in Boyle Heights, which I actually don't know the name to. I just know where it's located. It's actually right by Max's older brother's studio out there. So that's going to be our whole thing this weekend, and starting to source like the cast iron wooden stove. And so I've been spending a lot of time out there, and we're building my office in the exact same way as well on the property, because as you guys all hear every episode, Barley's whining in the background. So I want an official office that I can get away from. It can be really professional at that point. So I've been spending so much time outside, connected with this land and the earth, and I'm really happy about this season and getting to go to Scotland soon. And we've been insane here this week. I mean, you guys probably are seeing it on social, but we've been hiring, I want to say 4 new positions. We're just expanding and getting so legit and hiring a lot. And it feels really cool because I feel, well, I can't take full credit for this. I have been doing a lot of work around this to call in the perfect team, but I have to give a lot of credit to Nikki on our team and Grace, who I think are also up-leveling their frequency so quickly through the work or through making choices and through the other work that they do, that we're pulling in such cool people that I'm so excited to collaborate with. So that's been insane this last week. And then also we did a full week of podcast episode recording. So that means Monday through Friday, Lila and I were just like hammering down podcast guests, which you have a lot of really cool ones to look forward to. Some big highlights are Holly Madison, that you guys remember was a former bunny, and Hugh Hefner's partner. She does the work. So she's coming on to do a process episode. Somebody had sent us a screenshot that she had taken with the podcast in the background, and they're like, oh my gosh, Holly does the work. And then we pulled it up and we're like, oh my gosh, she really does do the work. What a cool and expansive, interesting person with such a unique walk of life to come on and talk about that. So that's a really fun one to look forward to. Like this episode, I've gotten very specific downloads of which podcasts I've been on where I've educated a little bit further, kind of like the Luke one. Very specific curation is communicated to me of what you all need to hear. This is one of them. And then in a couple of weeks from now, we have another one of them coming out where I talked solely about relationship on another podcast. And mostly, I mean, there's lifestyle stuff too, but that one is really one to look forward to. And I'm going to start, obviously I talk about this all the time because I miss them so much, my roundups again, but I have to say I got that eye mask, the new one that Blue Blocks put out. And thank you all. I know so many of you are making me feel less crazy in the world and normalizing the blue blocking glasses and all of the biohacking. But I see so many of you like me who are wearing the red glasses and the yellow ones during the day. But Blue Blocks, they came out with a new eye mask, and I'm a huge eye mask, what do you call them? Connoisseur? I'm like Goldilocks. I'm like, this one's too tight. This one doesn't, cover enough light. And so I had just picked up 2 in New York when I was there because Lunya has a couple of the ones that I've actually come to like a lot because they're silk and, it doesn't take away your oils and doesn't age you as much, but they're a little too tight for me. It takes a long time to wear them in. So I was just stoked because I lost them on travels and I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to pick up, a couple. So I have them. And then I got the Blue Blocks one, and holy shit, it's like the Porsche of eye masks. I'm not messing with you. So even in Topanga, I still get a lot of light pollution from the valley side, even though we're closer to the ocean side. And so every night, even when I was without my Lunia, I was literally putting one of our hippie wool socks over my eyes to cover my eyes. And this one came, and why it's so profound is that it blocks every piece of light. It literally is pitch black, and it doesn't put any compression on your eyes. So it's kind of like goggles in a way, so that your eyelids have zero pressure. You can even have your eyes open inside of them while you're falling asleep, and it's totally black. So I got it. I just have to tell you guys about that. And what other cool things have? So there are 2 sweaters that I'm very excited about. Everybody knows I'm a bit, you'll hear about this in this episode too. I'm very, very much into subconscious projection through style. So really projecting those subconscious archetypes that we identify with and getting very clear on them. I always say that mine, well, you've heard it a million times before, so I don't need to go into that. But when we were in Amagansett, I love Tina, the store. I could save up a whole year's worth of income to shop in there because she sources all of my favorite high-end brands, and it's so well curated. I believe she's a former stylist, and it is, to me, we'll link her store below. I don't think she has what I'm going to be talking about yet up on the site. So you'll have to pop to the store or DM them, or maybe it'll come onto e-commerce soon, because I actually recently looked. I wanted to gift Max's mom the same sweater. So we get in there. I picked up a couple of pieces for the speaking tour from the brand Too Good, Toogood, their English brand. So chic, like very old London. And so I had that shipped back to LA, and then that night we went out to dinner with, again, Maggie Harson, the episode you need to re-listen to. And it was so chilly out already, it felt like fall. So it was my excuse to go back to Tina and be like, well, I need some sweaters. It's cold, So I was just looking at her regular lineup, and she pointed me, and it felt very soul connected. She was like, well, we actually private labeled our own sweaters, and they're far less of the cost than they should be, and as well as up against the other ones she carries. And she went to explain them. So she sought out the oldest Scottish knitting company, I want to say, and there's a very specific, she explained this all, there's a very specific way they used to tie the yarn or spindle the yarn or whatever, so that it never frays and it never stretches and it never gets those little peely balls on them, which all of my cashmere sweaters do. And it's a much thicker weighted sweater than most cashmere. So it's very much the old process from hundreds of years ago of how they used to make the sweaters. And she sought them out, and she used them, and plus picked out like the perfect colors for them. And when I put them on, number one, they're 2 pieces I'll have for life. And she's like, they will last you for life. You can hand wash them. You can machine wash them on cold and gentle, and they'll be fine. You don't have to get them dry cleaned. And so I got the color that I always wear, like a sort of sandy tan color in cashmere sweaters. And Max was like, you have to have indigo. And so I got this turtleneck one that's so beautiful. It's such a life piece. And Max got me the indigo because he was really on his birthday, his literal birthday day, he bought me a cashmere sweater. And so those have been my 2 most prized possessions that I can't wait to take to Scotland and to have for all of this cooler weather up at the house that's to come. And that's another thing on an announcement side. I don't know if everybody received the newsletter, but we just announced and launched. The dates are open now from January to March for the house. So for people who have to plan a little further out that are flying into California, those are now available. They'll be linked below. Still the same price, but heads up, as of March and April, we'll be hiking the prices back up again, because that's when the season starts. So if you're somebody who's wanting to get in at this $450 price, sleep 6 people, now's the time to look at the calendar before we start to hop that back up again. And whoa, the house is almost totally sold out into December. So we're really, really excited that you guys are enjoying and using this space to go and really use it for its intention to retreat and to find yourself and to do the work there and to use all of the biohacking amenities. It's been really, really awesome and cool. And so I want to say, is there anything else exciting that I mean, obviously, all I do is talk to people about this like bean protocol that I'm doing from my friend Unique Hammond, and also through her mentor, Karen Hurd, who came up with this actual philosophy. I've talked about it in quite a few episode intros now, but we'll just link that below if you're like, what is she talking about? The bean, whatever. I think I have Shiva Rose, Nitsa doing it now. Lila's doing it. I basically tell everybody, and you'll hear all about it in an episode we recorded this week with Jordan, the Balanced Blonde. You guys all know her as the Balanced Blonde, who is actually going to blow your mind on this podcast episode, because she actually sees, this isn't today's episode, it's coming up in November, I believe, but she sees my face shapeshift during the episode. And what does she see? The exact same stuff that Shaman Durek saw that lives on the land. So you get to really actually hear her powers on this episode, but we go in depth of how I went to go see like the Chinese sorceress who literally made a supplement appear out of thin air and told me about my liver. And then I kismetly saw Unique 3 days later, who told me how she healed her entire, like, I want to say the worst, most extreme case of Crohn's I've ever heard of, and is in full remission. Like, hormones are completely stable, and I mean, she looks healthier than she did when I knew her in her late 20s. So I was like, give me all of this information. And I started literally working with Unique the next day, because she's a nutritionist. And then I also reached out to her mentor, Karen, just for a little refining if I needed it. So I hope to have both of them on this podcast, because I am astounded by how accessible, simplistic, effective. It takes a while, but effective this form of healing is. It's mind-blowing to me. And when you go on to Karen's topic page, she has articles and seminars for each different topics, from like arthritis to, I mean, you name it, ailment-wise, cancer, blah, blah, blah. But if you go down a little bit further on that page, you can click on podcasts. And of course, I've digested every piece of information I can find Karen on. But it's basically this old radio show that she would come on, I think, once a week. And she would bring on a client who's healed themselves from a various illness. And she would walk through how you get that illness, how you heal it with like the 5 very simple things she makes everybody do, but tailored a little bit differently to whatever their illness is. And then you hear about the person's experience in full remission or healing. So yeah, if you're interested, go geek out on that, like all of us are doing. I also have my friend Dana doing it. I mean, I just can't stop talking about it, so bear with me. And poor Max has to do it with me too right now, and he's like, I don't notice anything, and I'm like, your BO's gone, because he way overproduces stress hormones, which is what Karen tells you, like that's where that odor's coming from. And like for me, as another, I keep telling like the different the different cures I'm seeing within my body, or shifts I'm seeing within my body. And one of the big ones is that I don't have to wear deodorant anymore if I don't want to. My breath, there's like never later in the day that I have to rebrush before I go out to a dinner or something. Not that that was ever too bad, but there's zero like breath stuff happening whatsoever. And again, my skin is the most notable thing. It just looks so unbelievably glowy, like pregnancy glow all the time. And my sleep is way deeper. My blood sugar levels are completely stabilized at all times now. And my energy levels are a lot better. So also my last cycle, I didn't have any fatigue around it. I was nice to Max the whole time. And it was the first time I could totally survive in New York without having to head up to Woodstock or get away in order to recover from the city. So let's get into today's episode. Today's episode's one, again, that was channeled through to me to share with you. If you heard it in the past, I think it's from maybe 3 years ago. I was on Katie Dalebout's podcast, Let It Out, my first episode with her. And we just go super in depth into a lot of this technique, a lot of how I discovered it, how to apply it, my different thoughts on things. And then we get into body image, we get into style. It's just a really, I think it's like 2 hours long, a 2-hour long episode about stuff that I've channeled that people are going to take away from this. So You're going to love it. If you're not familiar with Katie Dalebout, she has been on this episode before. I've been on hers twice. She is the amazing creator of Let It Out podcast. She's also just launched her new publication, and you can find that linked below. And she also has a book as well out there in the world, and it's completely dedicated to journaling practices, which we will link below as well. And on top of all of that, she was actually hugely instrumental for us creating this podcast because it was the most requested thing from our community. We never intended to have a podcast, and we were like, oh shit, well, what do we do? And I reached out to Katie, who is literally the biggest light. She's a projector, really, really generous, sweet Taurin. And she said, check out my course. I have a whole course, Let It Out podcast course, where it basically walks anybody interested in a podcast, ever having one, through everything. What equipment to have, how to do sponsorships, how to come up with your rate sheet, how to literally reach out to guests, what to do when guests are there, how to edit your podcast. I mean, it's literally from beginning to end, how to start a podcast and have it and grow it. So if anybody is interested in something like that, her course, I think, is just about to reopen, and you can use the code MAGNETIC, capital MAGNETIC, for $25 off. We will link that below. Couldn't recommend it enough. We used it for almost most facets of this podcast when launching it, and we still reference it. So I'm a huge proponent of sharing that information, even though they were so generous. They're like, here's the episode. You don't have to plug anything. Like, of course, share it. You know, it was really special. And I'm like, no, I need to tell people about this. Without further ado, enjoy today's episode.
Oh, okay. So that's kind of your present here. You've just landed here. I want to go back a bit to your zoom the lens back and start at the very, very beginning of your work. And you and your work really examines childhoods. And I would love to know what you were like as a kid and how that shaped you, or, you know, what you had to unblock. But what were you like as a kid? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, I had a really interesting childhood, I think. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people can relate who have had this childhood, but so my mom had basically just gotten kicked out of her home in high school because she was being so bad. And so her mom said, you're going to go live with your grandmother in Mariposa, California, which is right outside of Yosemite. So she cruised up there to go to like a bad school. I don't know what you call them, but you know, like she wasn't doing well in school. So that's where she met my dad. I think they were 18 and 19 and they just were hanging out and got pregnant. So I came along and,
so they were really young in high school?
Very young. I think my dad had decided that he wasn't going to do high school anymore. He was just going to go straight to JC. So he got his diploma and went to JC, or what do you call that when you get your GED and then you go. And so they got pregnant and everyone was like, what are you doing? Don't have a kid. You're so young. They weren't really in love or anything like that. But my mom couldn't get an abortion. And I mean, she just chose not to. She felt guilty about it. And obviously I have a really introspective perspective on emotions and people's inspiration for making choices. I believe she just came from a very unloved home and had never experienced love. So I think for a lot of people, the answer for that can be a baby, whether it's in a marriage or if you don't have a sense of your own love. So they had me. And I then was in a really interesting situation because she was a waitress, he was a roper, and then had to go get a real job, which became, he became an insurance salesman and then broker. And then when I wasn't with them, because they split up relatively soon, I had a whole bunch of other caretakers that raised me. So I had a total village. I lived between like 4 different households in 1 week. Wow. It was insanity. Wow. So I had my aunt and uncle they are my father's sister and her husband, and he's Iranian. So I had this really like incredible dynamic of modeling that's Middle Eastern and that culture, which is very family oriented. And he loves children. So he was really present with us. So they were very educated and stable and made great money. And I have two cousins that are their sons, and we're all kind of the same age. So they were kind of my brothers growing up. And then aside from that,
Are you still close with them?
I am, in a way. We've lived apart for so long because they're still in my hometown, and I love them so much. And I love watching their kids, grow up. But we haven't really lived in the same town since we were 17. So it's so hard, even though I know we love each other so much, it's hard to be hyper close. But they're fantastic. And then my dad's parents also helped raise me, and they were kind of my biggest sense of modeling for caretakers. They were truly the most loving, the most stable. It's also where I was first introduced to anything alternative, because my grandmother was really into it. She was a medium, and they had a house in Santa Cruz, their summer house. So we were always there, and she was just always into weird shit, like bathing nude. It was all around, like crystals, all the things. So I really got that from her. So my childhood, it was that's a lot of the good. Obviously, I think that a kid being raised by two kids in a lot of different homes has a lot of places where the ball can be dropped with self-esteem and connection and, stability, which is, I think, so important when you're growing up. So for me, by the time I moved to LA and I was an actress, I think even though I came off as a very confident person, I think my self-esteem was pretty low and insecure. And I don't think being a model or an actress helped that in any way. It only fosters those insecurities. And I do always like to make the point and tell people, when you see, and a lot of my body of work, after April of this year is going to be centered on a whole new collection of work of authenticity. But when you see these, for instance, I'll pick celebrities because it's a pop culture that so many people are familiar with in the collective consciousness. But when you see someone like Angelina Jolie or Jennifer Lawrence, or someone like Gabby Hoffman, who is incredible, but not the traditional, starlet, it's fascinating to watch when you see them in an interview. What makes them so magnetic? There's many things, but what truly makes everybody tune in and can't take their eyes off of them is how they are so authentically, vulnerably themselves and not trying to do an ego dance. They're very detached. They're really, really just vulnerably being honest. And, when I work with artists, and myself included, when I reflect back on this, I was so not in place. And it really was such a reflection of how, growing up with my mom alone, and she grew up in a household of sisters where everyone was so beautiful, but there was a raging alcoholic father, a totally ritualistic religious mother. And so there was no love, there was no self-esteem, no self-worth, but what they all were loved for constantly were their looks. And so that was very much inherited for me. So a lot of my worth came from beauty and looks and everything external. And I had no true sense of what my authentic uniqueness was inside. And so when I started to actually manifest a lot and throw away what I call sort of pop new age, think positive rhetoric, and started to do the work on my self-worth and self-esteem, I was like, oh, look what's starting to show up when I step into my authenticness, my truth, and then also my power. And that's where I started to kind of figure out this whole process of that never fails me. That is fascinating.
So it's so cool how you've debunked so much of this through your own experience. So you're in LA, you are acting and modeling, and I think I heard you say someone gave you a book on manifestation.
Totally.
Is that how it came to you? And so talk a little bit about that time, and then I really want to get into some of the concepts. I have a few that I want to hit on, but really maybe addressing this, what you were starting to say about the pop self-help and all the Abe books and
Totally.
the whole gang. And, I've been in a place where I've used it as spiritual entertainment.
Totally right. It's like laughable.
Like I'll turn on a video of like Abraham Hicks pimple, Abraham Hicks relationship thing, Abraham Hicks whatever, like just wanting something.
Yeah.
And then not understanding really how to use the concepts.
Sure.
So, that's how it came to you. So then did you have success with it? Tell us everything.
So this is a great question. So so my mom's like a hyper Libra, very, very intuitive. I mean, she's very naturally a medium and also very clairvoyant. Things come to her in her dreams constantly. So even though that was so bad in her household growing up, which anyone, if you have a sensitive child with extra sensory, what do you call that? Extra sensory abilities.
I think so, yeah.
It's really important to give them confidence in that and to, not be afraid of it, because her mother was very Catholic and a lot of biblical writings, talk about how bad that is. But I think we all have gifts. And so she was always really into it and secretly into it. And we always had a family intuitive, and she did tarot and all of those things. And so it was a family intuitive that I finally consulted when I started acting. And what's actually really fascinating, and this isn't to boast about me in any capacity, but she saw this and told my mom right before she'd spoken to me. She was like, I see Lacy winning an award and she's going to be really big in the world, like Oprah. I don't see it like acting. And I remember being like, fuck that. She's not right. I'm going to be so big at acting. But that's really fascinating when I look back at her old premonitions.
She's so right.
And she had said at the time too, with my mom, she was like, you're going to go into the medical field, because my mom's a paramedic now. My mom's like, no way in hell will I ever be in the medical field. So she's fascinating. But the book that she did suggest when I was like, what do I do for acting? I am so poor, how do I kind of control my reality in some sense when you have so little control over it in the arts? And she had prescribed the book, The Game of Life and How to Play It. It's a very old book from the 30s. And so I read it. Like, I actually still have my original copy that, has all the underlines and my notes and all of these things. And I mean, I followed that book to a T. I was so militant because I just really wanted some form of success. And though it taught me like a lot of beautiful spiritual principles, I just wasn't having any success with it. And that's right about the time when The Secret really became big and it hit the scene. And I was already hooked on manifestation at that, right? Because
I already know all of this.
Well, more than that, I was like, I want to manifest the things I want. So I was in the rabbit hole. Yeah. And then that led to the Hicks and all of the things. And I think I've read pretty much most manifestation books under the sun, and I have them in my library because I'll refer back to them of what to demystify. Yeah. But so I think I got really fed up. It was around 25 that I finally was like, okay, these things, I've been thinking positive till I'm blue in the face. I've been following all of this, like keeping my thoughts, like really trying to keep them in the yogic life, not Kundalini yogic, but like more of what we practice in the West, where it's like peace and love. And I'm really fucking peace and love.
Yeah.
Now.
But then I'm going to go in the parking lot and like, and flick someone off.
Totally. Or have a freak out or a meltdown, but I'm not going to acknowledge those feelings because I really want to move them back into the positive. So that vibration doesn't attract this badness to all that superstition. Yeah. And so at 25 was around the time where I was starting to actually do some work on myself and starting to step into my power. And I started to actually notice it with relationships first. Relationships are what made me learn this modeling pretty quickly, because I saw that when I would step into my worth and turn down tests and all of the things that we can talk about in here, what I would ask for specifically on a list, like down to hair color, this, that, I mean, crazy specifics, I would manifest it. And I'd be like, holy fuck. When I would meet the person, I would be like,
this is magic. You are, and I would show them the list and be like, I don't think I'm crazy, but like,
what was their reaction to that?
Always, this current fiance is very spiritual. So to him, he's like, oh, I went to India and I called you in, I was finally met with my match in a beautiful way. And he's so wonderful. But this is something I will say about Tauran men. They're usually, unless they've gone through some sort of big trauma, Tauran men are so earthy and so into groundedness and pleasureness that they don't have a big spiritual connection. So to him, he'd always be like, oh, that's cool what you do, but I do this, which is none of that. So we couldn't rejoice in that together, which is totally fine. But things like that would happen. I mean, constantly. And so I started to go, okay, fucking throwing away all of these books that have failed me. And I'm going to just start doing what I do, or playing with energy. And I've always had a really weird gift that I was born with, and maybe it's because of my mom, where I understand energetics very well. Like, for instance, I can tell if this thing happens, this thing will follow. I just am very understanding of how energy fills space and how it moves.
So you had that before you even started reading the books?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I didn't honor it much because nobody had shown me how to hone in on that, or because if you're an insecure person, odds are you're not really listening to your intuition very much, because you don't feel worthy of it on a subconscious level. So it was also around that time that I was like, no, dude, I'm always right. Like, I knew that was going to happen before it happened. And I know when she said this would fall. Like, I started to really honor it for the first time. And it's not crazy. I was also stepping into my worth, and growing my low subconscious self-worth. And so that's when I started to really play, and I started to notice these books are bullshit in the sense that the universe tests me every time when I've stepped away from something that was no longer serving me and started to step into my power. I would get tests, and I started to get to the point where, and forgive my language, but this is just how I speak, where I would be like, don't fuck with me, universe. I'm not playing around here. Like, I asked for this and I'm not settling for less. And that's when it would show up. So it was like I was doing the work. And then I started to realize too, that until I had seen enough and believed enough of something existing, there wasn't space for it to come through. So a lot of everything I teach was just through my own research, through trial and error. And that's when I started to, especially with relationships, once I had it down. I mean, you can even ask my friends who were with me single last time, where I would be like, watch. And I could be like, a test is going to come. Here comes the test. And then I would be like, bam, there's my person. And the list, all the things I'm asking for. And that's when I started to really understand, think positive, stay in the forward. All of that does not matter at all. And more importantly, it's debilitating people.
Yes.
It's such a disservice. And I say that from a place of suffering for so long in that space, where I could have had things so much quicker and aligned with things that I really wanted, that were within my heart, and not even ego. See, I'm not some famous actress or anything, which all was a very egoic asking to have my parents finally see me and love me, and all the things that we set out for when we have ego once. So it's that's a big part of my mission and message, is to be please welcome your polarity. Please welcome your negative emotions. They are not going to manifest. They are not what's manifesting. Yeah. Your thoughts don't manifest. It's so far deeper than that.
Yeah. And you say this in one of the videos that I watched, think about it for a second. Of course our thoughts don't manifest. It would be a shit show.
Totally.
So
we think in polarity all day long. It's I'm stuck, I'm great, this, that, bad, as if we're that powerful.
Right.
It's a joke.
Right. Which is so, I feel because I grew up Catholic school, the whole thing.
Wow.
And I feel like I switched that programming for the Abraham Hicks and the spiritual and whatever, to the point where, that was so dogmatic and rigid. And I have a personality type that's, that is part of
ritualist or obsessive. I'm the same in a lot of ways.
So I pick up that stuff easy. And I applied that kind of same rigidity to new age, pop new age stuff that we were talking about. And then, you know, finding your work is like this breath of fresh air. It's like taking off a shoe that's too tight.
Good.
But I will say it's taking time. Like even now, I had all these weird rituals of like, if I thought something that was bad or negative, I was like, don't focus on that. Like quickly think of something else.
Me too.
And I even had this thing that I would say where like, and I actually did it just now, like during this conversation, because I'm like, oh, this is so good. I'm like looking at the recorder. I'm like, did I press record? I had a moment where I was like, oh, it's not going to record. And then I say in my mind, when I say something that I don't want to happen, I'm like, cancel.
Oh, this thing that I see all these superstitions. So mine would be, because that book, the first one I mentioned, would say, you know, bless the person and just send love, like to cancel out the energy right away, like send the, and so I'd always be like, I bless them. I bless this. And it's like, this is such bullshit. Yeah. But you know what's really funny? I have this Ukrainian friend that we were really close friends when we were in our 20s. And it's so fascinating because I think every culture, just back to prehistoric times, we all have superstition for how things happen. And so she has, I mean, the Russian culture is so superstitious where it's like, never step on a right foot. Don't do this. If you do. And it was funny when I would start to notice that I was like, oh my God, this is me, but just in spirituality. Yeah. And I had also so many of those. And that's where I'm like, guys, please let it go. And if there's anything anyone takes away from this podcast, like there's a few things that are truly making someone manifest, but the most important, I believe, is that your authentic energy, the universe, God, source, vortex, I don't care what you're working with. I believe its only objective is to get us into our true authentic nature of why we came here. And guess what? Everyone's so unique and different. And as human beings in the human experience, a lot of that isn't pretty. And that's where if we can start to just welcome who we are truly, our true authenticness, and we can get closer to that, watch what starts to happen in your life when you honor that.
Yeah, that's alignment. That's kind of everything.
That's when people say flow, like whatever. Alignment is when you're aligned.
Being authentic.
It's being authentic. And like I tell people, authenticity isn't something that you're doing. It starts to turn into honoring you. So it's like a great tiny exercise I'll have when people are so far away from truly listening to their intuition and themselves and not understanding what is authentic or not. I'll always tell them, these are people who they've had so much shame happen, or they were they weren't pretty their whole lives, or they had a mom that was very emotionally abusive or verbally, or these are people who have shrunk so small that they're people who actually benefit from having an ego. They really benefit from starting to step into that ego, which ego starts to mean individuality, separating from the collective consciousness. And sometimes that's the perfect medicine when you feel no sense of worth at all. So when people are starting to play with the energy, and this is a lot of what my work will be about in the rest of the year, just the energetics around authenticity, because I understand energy so well, where I'm like, the opposite is usually always more magnetic. And that's not the truth for everybody. But what I mean for that is I'll have people start to all day long just look at their preference, and I have them question. It's just so simple, where I'll be like, all day long, I want you to look and go, I like that. I don't like that. I like this. I don't like that. And starting to learn who their authentic person is. So for instance, if something comes along and they're like, I love this. I like that. I have them question, do you? Do you really? Is that programming? Do you like something? And there's no right answer. You can only lie to yourself. Your true authenticness, that is your magnetism. So it doesn't matter what it looks like, if it's positive or if it fits into some mold. Your uniqueness is actually what's going to magnetize everything to you when you step into that and you expand.
Wow. Okay. This is blowing. That's such a great exercise.
Yeah. That's a big one. That's so small. Like people are always like, I don't have clarity. I don't know what I want to do.
people who go, I don't have clarity, it's they divinely aren't supposed to yet because they're picking up lessons and learning things that they're supposed to, that once they do have that clarity, it will all hit them and come together, that they had the tools they needed to follow through with it. So it's like, if you're in an unclear area, even though it feels so frustrating, it's actually one of the most magical spaces to be in, because you're discovering yourself and collecting everything you need for that moment you hit your clarity to move forward. I always say, like, the universe is never going to leave you hanging forever. It's needing you to collect what you need to get into your authenticity, that once you get that divine download, you can just, bam, you have the tools to run into it. Yeah. Whether it's that shitty job that you're at and you're spinning your wheels in, I can guarantee 5 things you're learning at that job are what you're going to need when you have that clarity to carry through with this career you're supposed to have. So I tell that to people.
Yeah.
But, and we can maybe just get into the clarity questions when you have that. The other part of the clarity thing, either they just haven't seen it yet, meaning like the expansion, they haven't actually seen that the thing exists that they're wanting to work on or call in, or career, they just haven't seen it yet. Yeah. Or the other part of it, they're so out of tune with their own intuition because they've had so much programming their whole lives that have told them that their intuition's wrong, that they don't know at this point how to tap in and listen to it.
I love all of that. And I think you kind of are alluding to expanders, which is partly what they need. But before we get to that, when you say connecting to your intuition, when that is something that is challenging, what is your advice for doing that and connecting?
So I always tell people, number one, exactly what I just told you. It is literally step one is, do I like this? Don't I like this? Like preference. It's just quick to start to learn and start to honor your truth, because we are astounded when we become conscious of how much we're just going with the flow or doing what we learned or following through with other people's perceptions. It is baffling. And then you start to uncover it and you're like, I actually don't like this and I don't like that. So that's number one. If you don't have a sense of how to listen to your true intuition. Number two is start getting rid of anything that's something you don't like. Like, I know if it's something big, like a job you have to be in, obviously that takes time, and type in career on the blog and you'll get some resources for that. But if it's as simple as someone you spend a lot of time with that doesn't make you feel good, they got to go. Like, you've got to start. Anything that's not reinforcing your authenticity is going to continue to reinforce not to listen to your intuition.
Yeah. But before we get into debunking some of your kind of main cornerstones of what you teach, I want to pick up on something we were talking about just there with the superstitions and kind of what you were alluding to. You talked about this in one of your old posts of not, if you can't get out of that job, like you were just saying, or you can't change something immediately, to protect yourself, because you talked about this in this post that I got caught in my head because I loved it so much, where you talked about, if someone says something to you that knocks you out and gets caught in your head, it's okay, but you just are kind of like, oh shoot, I'm going to have to do some deprogramming work to fix that. Like, it's not a big deal. But what kind of advice can you have for people for protecting that from happening, or to deprogram kind of quickly when something comes at them that takes them out of what they want?
Yes, that's a great question. And so number one, I tell people, especially if you're a new manifester or new at manifesting this way, because a lot of goal books or manifestation books will be like, share. The more you share with, the more the vibration is out. You're speaking the vibration, so it'll come back. It's all bullshit. So what I say is, like, I'm a big proponent of having manifestation boundaries, because if you are new to manifesting and you haven't, I always say, trust in the universe or whatever you're working with. It's like a muscle. And I don't believe that trust is something that should be given. I think it's something that's earned over time. For instance, with manifesting, the more you manifest and the bigger it is, you're going to trust manifesting a lot more. You're going to trust the universe or whoever you're working with a lot more. You're going to take bigger leaps of faith. So it's like working out. The more that you work it out and manifest, the more you'll trust it. So if you're new to manifesting and that trust muscle isn't that strong, don't share what you're manifesting. Yeah. So that's number one. Don't share it, because whenever we're doing something, especially if it's against the grain of what we've been doing, there are going to be a lot of people, good and bad, most of them who just love us and have our best interests at heart, are going to tell us all the reasons why we shouldn't and it's not safe. And that is such a problem, because they knock us out of our own authentic journey. So I, for instance, for years would never tell people what I was, especially if it was something really radical and big and different, what I was manifesting, because I would just get the same feedback that would really make me question it, discount it. Again, if you're working on your intuition and strengthening it, anytime something's reinforcing against your intuition, you are going to, intuition's energy. So like when I feel it and see intuition, it's very strong and projecting, or it's very small and little. It's just like self-worth, or confidence is another kind of physical term to put that in, or energetic, common term to put that in. When we start sharing things that's vulnerable of what we're calling in and manifesting, or our intuitive insights of where we're supposed to be going, and we get a lot of pushback from people who aren't supporting it, it's going to take that energy and make it small again and low. So I'm a big proponent when I'm working with clients, they'll be like, oh, but my mom, I'm like, don't fucking tell your mom. Like, don't
rule number one,
have boundaries. And I had to learn that the really hard way. And I did. And it's so fascinating, because as soon as I would really manifest what I wanted, people didn't question it anymore, because it wasn't fearful or there wasn't something unsafe about it. And they really respected what I was capable of. So it's like, that's number one. And number two, another big thing that I think is really important with this is if I'm working with clients, I tell them, please do not go see psychics. Please do not go do that if you're working with me, because unless it's someone you've had your whole life that is 100% accurate every time, what can happen, myself included, is that experience, I believe in free will and co-creating. I don't believe that there's any total destiny. I believe that you're constantly co-creating. So if you go to a psychic who has a really profound impact on you, but starts to imprint all these limiting beliefs of what can and can't happen or where you're going, it takes heavy lifting to deprogram that through expanders and through deprogramming. So you're going to have to do like twice the work in order to get rid of that programming. So those are kind of my two that work really well for me and my clients. It's like, make sure you have boundaries if you're new to this and you don't fully wholeheartedly listen to yourself and stay in your power. And two, please don't go see. Like I have clients that will, because I understand when we're in a place of needing hope and needing insight. If you have an intuitive you seek that never tells you futuristic things, but they'll intuitively comment on like, I feel that this is good or that of what you're already coming up with, fine. But please don't go to like futuristic people. Or if you're working with me, don't do it. Just because it's going to take a lot more work if it goes against the grain of what you're manifesting.
I'm so glad we talked about that, because I think that's so important for doing this work and keeping it, getting the results or getting, feeling the clarity is not to be knocked off. And those things can knock you off so quickly.
Absolutely.
I'm glad we covered that. Okay. Something else that I want to get into. So you say, and you believe, and I also believe, that our beliefs are what we manifest from, not our thoughts, which we've been talking about. So let's get into our beliefs and deprogramming and talk a little bit about, your offering Unblocked, especially reparent, and why, I mentioned that a bit at the beginning, but starting with childhood and going back that far, and specifically why shame is so harmful.
Absolutely. So what I started to learn for myself, obviously what we said is I was like, my thoughts aren't determining a lot because I'm spending an excessive amount of energy trying to be positive and trying to visualize what I want. And so I started to, it was really weird and intuitive. I was so young, and I remember being on the beach, having studied nothing in psychology or anything like that before, and questioning myself. I was actually looking at patterns in dating of men who had showed up in my life. And I was like, I'm just so curious. Do they resemble anyone from my caretaking, like whoever raised me? And every single one of them represented someone who, and I have, so I'm different than a lot of people because I have so many caretakers. So when we have so much different imprintation, we're attracting so many different types of personalities.
I relate to that so much. My mom was one of 6 and the same sort of thing.
Village. Yeah. So
fascinating.
It's so fascinating. And, I mean, that was so young, and I started to really journal, and I was like, wow, it's actually interesting because this one particular person in my childhood, they are the reason why I'm afraid of this. And I started to map and look at stuff, and I was like, this is really limiting me. And this was super early on. And then I started to myself like study a lot of different modalities in psychology, and I started to go, wow, this is profound when you actually do work. And not in psychology, unfortunately, a lot of it is talk therapy, so it gives you a lot of awareness, but nothing was a deeper subconscious situation. And for me, I started to realize that obviously I don't believe thoughts attract what we want. You know, they're not what are the drivers for manifestation. I believe it's beliefs, but even more importantly, subconscious beliefs. And I started to notice when I would do my own versions of mapping, I was like, every single block relates back to childhood. Like, I'll find something in my 20s and I'll be like, yeah, but did this ever happen earlier? And it would always, and like about 14 or 15 is when it felt really solidified. When I would map, it would always come back to under 14 or 15. Wow. The original belief or the original dynamic or relationship that I was continuing to manifest today, whether it was coming or not coming. Obviously, if it was coming, it's because I felt like I had worth on the subconscious level. If it wasn't coming, it was because I didn't have worth, that something had programmed that I was unworthy of something through shame. Wow. And so shame is the biggest creator of our shadow when we're growing up, and even in our adult lives. Shame, you can thank shame for anything you're not manifesting in your life, or you can thank having never seen it on a subconscious level before. So shame is the root of every limiting belief we have. And you can always tie every single thing back down to when you felt unworthy or unlovable. However, it's in the subconscious state where you can actually manipulate it and shift it. And so when I work with people, it's through hypnotic, which you've experienced. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of hypnotic work, because that's like where the beauty of neuroplasticity comes in, where we can legitimately recreate our neural pathways and the way that they circuit and connect. And so when I started to do a lot of that on myself, I started to see that the world showed up to me totally differently. So much of my model and my message is, we're not manifesting from our thoughts. We're manifesting from the imprintation that was developed through the ages of 0 to 14, which all comes from peer programming, media programming that we witness, relationship modeling through our caretakers and our parents, how our parents viewed society, how our teachers told us if we were worthy or not worthy. And all of that's comprised, and it's what we're still manifesting today, whether good or bad. Every single dynamic, every single thing that's coming into your life is from an imprintation you picked up during those years. And so, yeah, I know it's a lot.
It's a lot. And it's so, okay, don't worry, everyone, because there are programs that exist because of this amazing woman that I'm sitting across from who can help you to really solve this Velcro, and we're going to get there, and we're on the way there. But quick pit stop. So you realize, you get so into psychology and start realizing the subconscious and mirror neurons and all of these things. This is when you're still really young and acting, and after you read those books?
No, this was in the last 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay, so
through
more recently.
So many. Yeah, it was probably, the last 5 years, I would say. That's when I started more of the hypnotic work, was around 5 years ago. And then I started to really develop my process through tons of reading and so much. And honestly, so much of it has been intuitive as well. Yeah. Like I'll discover something and not have a language for it. And then I'll pick up a book on shadow and I'll be like, that's the terminology.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is a really weird thing to share, but like for me, I feel a lot of this information is channeled through me. For whatever weird reason, I'm supposed to be helping people on this level. I don't know why. I certainly didn't choose it by any means. And so for me, I'll get a lot of channeling during meditation. I'll get where, for instance, something will come to light where it'll be like, that thing that they're denying about themselves, that they, feel shameful and it triggers them. If they were just able to start to accept it, that and really live it and own it, then it would kind of block that. It would open up that space for them to manifest. And then I would stumble on a book that's all about shadow, of like rejection and starting to integrate your aspects of self.
That's what I think is so interesting about your work, is because, so for me, I don't need the science. I don't care about the psychology. Yeah. If somebody who I like and I connect with and I relate to will tell me, I will do it.
Okay,
like
cool.
That's me.
Yeah.
But like my boyfriend, for instance, or like a lot of people I know want to know that this is steeped in psychology, or that this is what this is, and this is what this is. And then it works the same for both people, but people just have different lenses on it. And I've heard you talk about it in both ways. Yeah. I've heard you articulate it with the psychology and breaking down exactly what's happening that way. And then I've heard you talk about it in the more intuitive way, and you really blend both. Yeah. And I think what strikes me most about your work and why it's been so meaningful to me recently is because of how articulate you are. You are so articulate and clear, explaining, just sitting across from you. I've been thinking about it this time, and I've been, preparing for this, listening to you on other podcasts, and the way you write, obviously, but you're not only so articulate with it, but you're also relatable and funny and so engaging. So I feel like
can you just live with me? This is amazing. Can you be my PR person?
Of course. I'm on it. But really, I think that's something that, like we were kind of tongue in cheek saying earlier, of like, not another guru and another moon circle, and I'll bless them.
I bless them.
But it's kind of like, it's nice to let's just be real. And let's just talk about this, and this work is really meaningful, but also, it's okay. And it's light.
Don't take it seriously.
Right. Yeah. Right. I guess it's not really just a question. That's more of just what I'm thinking. But have you always been so articulate? Have you always been a good writer? And talking about these things comes so naturally.
Well, what's so fascinating is I don't consider myself a good writer. There was a very long period of time that I was deeply insecure about it, because since I lived with so many caretakers, I also moved schools constantly. And I just didn't have many people that cared about my homework too much. I mean, they wanted me to do well, but they also couldn't sit down and take the time to do it with me. So I have a terrible grammatical sense. I'm dreadful with all sorts of things, like spelling. So what I think in a way, even I remember my 4th grade teacher pulling my dad aside and being like, she has a real gift with writing. This is something you guys need to develop, rather than sports and things like that. But I think for me, I've always been a personable person. I've always been articulate in a lot of ways, but it wasn't until I started doing a lot of work of just owning who I am and where I'm at and letting that shame go. For instance, having a lot of insecurity around my writing.
I put it on the blog. Like a part of my owning process is to put it on the blog all the time. Like I would get people that would email. I'm like spitting while I'm talking. I would get people that would email like once a week, and they'd be like, I noticed all of these errors, but I love your writing.
I have that too.
Can we trade for coffee?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Like, nah, if you don't like it, don't tune in. Like it's who I am. Yeah. So when I started to own it on the blog, I'll say all the time, like, I have a terrible sense of grammar. I just own it. That's when I could, again, that's when we're starting to learn energy. It's when I could step more into my authenticness instead of being so shameful and like not sharing things or not having a blog of all things, because I'm afraid of my writing or rushing out to go academically, like teach myself. That's all shame based. I just have a message that I'm channeling to people, and the beginning kind of modality for that has been writing through a blog. It's obviously turning into YouTube and things like that, but it was just something I had to get through. So it's like, I don't really care about, you're missing the point if you're looking at that. So to answer that in a layered way, I think when you can start owning all of your shame, your faults, and really stepping into that power. And this is very different than ignorance. I'm not talking about being like, because ignorance, when I see that energy of ignorance, you can see that a lot, for instance, with politicians. That sense of ignorance, it's a different way of rejecting your shadow, right? Because you're like, it's the other spectrum where you're becoming so egoic about it. And so it's just another form of protection. But when you can actually release it all and own it and just be like, this is who I am, this is where I'm at, that's a different form of authentic magnetism. So I think when I started to own that, to be truly honest, people started to tune in more because it was me. I'll get people who, will come to me and they're like, how do I manifest it? It's funny. How do I manifest a bigger social media following? The first question I ask them is, why are you afraid and hiding so much still? Where are you hiding? Because where you're hiding, that's the energy that's resonating. People aren't coming to someone's social media or someone's anything because of the content usually. Some of it's really pretty, so it's content-based that's resonating, but most of it's an energy of the person. So wherever, I always say it, like, what we don't own owns us. If I constantly am shameful about my writing, it's going to own me and not many people are going to tune in. If I just own it and I'm like, hey guys, I'm a hillbilly and I write like this and you can read it or not, that's fine, but this is my message I'm channeling through this modality, a lot more people are going to tune in. It's that simple as starting to get into your authenticness. Now, if I had that shame, but I also am a diehard academic, my authenticness is the thirst for academia, and I go and better myself through academia, that's honoring my authenticness. But if I'm just doing that in order to be more pretentious or interesting or respected, again, that's another way of getting further away from my intuition and my authentic self. It's another form of what, say, a politician's doing. I'm just hiding behind a different mask rather than owning my truth.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes so much sense. I want to go back to the thread of where we get with Unblocked, but while we're on this, you talked about something recently that I wrote down in my journal because it really resonated. It like hit me hard, where you were talking about authenticity as a little pearl within us. Mm-hmm. And we are, I guess I have you right here, but I'll try to articulate and you can tell me. So basically we're protecting this pearl within us, and we all have these different, how thick our shell is based on all the things that we picked up like Velcro through our lives. But the more we let it out, like you were saying, with, movie stars and people who are really magnetic, they're magnetic because they're using their pearl. Yeah. Or they're showing their pearl.
Yeah.
So is that something that, and I think you brought that up because you were like, when you're from that place, when you're using that pearl within you and then you don't feel depleted and you can have more energy. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So I always look at my most magnetic clients. I have a handful of them and a couple of friends who are so magnetic. I feel like they're aliens that have been transplanted onto the planet.
Cool. Who like
probably me too, who like bypass shame somehow or lots of shame. So to start this off, I first want to say, all of us came onto the planet as our authentic selves, right? And of course, if we want to get super hippie and spiritual and out there, which I kind of try to avoid a little bit because the message doesn't resonate as deeply with a lot of people, but our souls, whether we're new souls or we've been traveling for a long time, we've also picked up shame and pain and all of this stuff in past lives. But I'm going to start with this life. So when you come onto the planet and you're born, you are truly your authentic state right then and there. And if we were to completely, change parenting as it is today, which I think is going to take a lot of years and centuries, the true way we should be raising children is to watch their pearl, their authenticness, watching it unfold, and us nurturing and guiding that. So if a child's showing you their strengths and their interests and their gifts, allowing us in a very safe way to nurture that, to find them mentors for it, to not shut down anything that they're going through, all of that, like to let them unfold and so gracefully bring those gifts and their authenticness brighter and bigger. If we did that, everyone would be an incredible manifestor on this planet because they would be so truly their authentic selves. However, that's not really the case. I would say, I'm yet to meet a parent who can really do that. And I myself am not a parent yet. I'm sure I'll fuck up all the same, So
without realizing it.
Because I have my own programming that I'll put on a kid. And I always say there's only a few things you can really give a kid. One is self-esteem, by what I'm talking about. And two is believing in all of their dreams, all of them, and giving them resources, even if you don't have money, finding ways to trade and help them. Like that's the other big one. And then also not shutting down any of their natural inclinations, meaning like their sexuality, their philosophy, their sport, like whatever their thing is, please, I don't know. That's such a big political topic. But if you can do those three things, you're going to have a child that's a pretty good manifester. So that's where I'll start with our authentic selves. Now, the work that I teach people is trying to crack open that big shell that we're all, and the way that I like to put it is most of what we are today is just a total compilation of an ego shell that's around the pearl, meaning that everything we are, whether it's from what we wear to our interests to where we live, is usually what we were loved for when we were little. So when we're tiny, we are so organically, authentically our own person. However, if there are circumstances around that are shameful, because we're an evolutionary species and when we're doing things that won't receive love and nurture, because we won't eat, be fed, and survive, we kind of put that away into what's called our shadows. So we start to get rid of those true, authentic bits of ourselves, and we become the shell of what was loved and what was accepted, what did get us further. So that's why when people are in stalemate and they're not manifesting a lot, it's because that they're so far away from being that pearl. And even when they think they're close, they're still usually pretty far away. And that's what all of the work that I'm creating and trying to create is how to bust open that shell and how to be in your power as that pearl, because that is your most magnetic state.
So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code, EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode.
So this is basically what your work with Unblocked does for different areas, but especially with the one I'm most familiar with, Reparent, goes through what you just spoke about. Because I think, what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago and what you just talked about right now, of like how, I'll speak for myself, it's really overwhelming to me and frustrating, and I feel sad. And again, so much love. They did the best they could.
Oh, everyone. Everyone
did the best they could. But like you said, everybody has, this is your line, but no matter how great you think your childhood was, there's probably something.
Always. It's a human experience.
Exactly. And I think for me, what I feel sad about sometimes is doing Reparent, which I'm so glad exists and I want you to talk about. But I feel like I am so sad that I feel like I have so much gunk and so much, my pipes are so clogged that I just wish that I could, crawl into your womb. That's the creepiest thing anyone has ever said.
I love that. That's really
But be
sweet.
reparented, and like, it's funny because, you say to call in your most magnetic parents.
Yeah.
I think because your voice is on there, I'm like, oh, like Lacy would be such a good mom.
Thank you for saying that.
Very
makes
creepy,
me feel good.
but...
No. It's really beautiful. It's just because you associate it with warmth of your nurturement of authenticness. That's all.
Yeah. And anyway, so I think it can just feel so lofty.
Yeah.
And your work, obviously, I'm asking a question that's maybe rhetorical, but it's possible. Can you talk about how it's possible to reprogram and unprogram and how you do that and what you have to offer with that?
Absolutely. So like the one thing I like to tell people is it's a lifelong process in the sense that, whatever age you're starting at, you had all those years before of programming, of not even really truly on a subconscious level, asking yourself, who am I authentically? So I always say, give yourself a break. The moment you start doing it and start like delayering, you are automatically creating magnetism, because I always say what creates situational magnetism is when you do any step that starts to step into your authenticness. That's what the universe reacts to. When people are like, I'm doing the work, but no tests are coming, it's because they haven't actually created situational magnetism. They haven't let go of something that's not serving them. They haven't done something to truly step into their authentic selves yet. But when we do, for instance, actionable ways of doing this, or like when you leave a relationship that's not serving you, or a job, even little stuff, when there's a friendship that's really toxic that you let go of, the universe perks up and it's like, oh, look who's creating magnetism by stepping into their authentic self. So it starts to throw things your way. So even if it feels lofty and big, and when you're in there, you're like, oh my God, I need to do this for a lot of rounds and revisit this. Don't worry. Just starting it is already creating magnetism. It's already working on you. It's already moving things in you, and allowing you to show up in the world a little bit differently. But it can release a lot for people, depending on what you went through, how sensitive of a person you are, how you handle experiences in trauma or small traumas of just shame, when you're like, fuck, that really sucked and that hurts. Like, even if it was something so small as a kid on the playground, and you're like,
you don't even realize, because you just stuff it. That's what I did. And I'm just trying to learn to feel again. Because my therapist has told me this for years. Like, I think my feelings, I'm trying to be in my body more and feel, because it all comes up. But Anyway.
And that's how it like manifests into illness and all of the things we're from. Are you an air sign? What are you?
Taurus.
Oh, you're a Taurus. That's interesting. But I mean, you guys are very intelligent and heady, so that's not crazy. Do you know what your moon and your rising are?
Yes, Leo moon.
There you go.
And I forget what my rising is. I'll have to look.
Interesting. But that's what most people, and there's a book I'll recommend to everybody, and a lot of listeners may have read it for this exact thing, called Letting Go by David Hawkins. Okay. It's fantastic for this, of how to just like really start releasing the stuff out of your body. It doesn't take you into the deeper subconscious work. Obviously the workshop will do that, but it does show you how to move through those levels of letting go, of grief, of anger, of, pain, sadness, to happiness. And then another thing I always try to tell people, I'm like, have support around you when you're doing this, whether it is like a really great friend, to a therapist, to a 12-step group, I don't tend to have a lot of support anymore. I did early on, but at this point I'm like, ooh, I'm just going to move through this, because every time I do, great stuff starts to show up, because I'm really showing up in the world differently from more authenticness. But even if it feels lofty and overwhelming, like the big message is take it at your pace, revisit it. Like this is a lifelong journey. Before I even started this work, had, 26, 27 years of programming, of low self-worth, of reinforcement of that daily in an industry that reinforced that. It's going to take time to feel confident enough to show up as your authentic self, and to trust that, and to start putting that authenticness forward and making decisions from that authentic place. It takes reprogramming and work and time, but by God, will you start to see manifestation happen way more than you will think positive and making a vision board. Like that is something I can attest to wholeheartedly.
Yes. Okay. So tell us about Unblocked, in particular, Reparent, and how those work on your website. I have a million more questions.
Yeah.
This
of course.
is a good time, because
absolutely,
I'm alluding to this is kind of the way you deprogram that.
Absolutely. And so for me, the way that Unblocked came about was because with my clients in my practice, I'd be like, read this book, do this thing. And they would be like, who has the time? And they just wouldn't do it. And I'd be like, you're wasting your money if you're coming to me and not doing the work. So I need to think of something where I can condense down the actual information that pertains to manifestation of work that they need to do. And I had seen my friend, Lauren Spencer King, who, if you don't know her, she's incredible at breathwork and has her own very amazing digital workshops that you should take. But she had put out one of her breathwork workshops, and it just all clicked to me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so accessible. It's so beta. I can price it at a point that I could have afforded when I was at my poorest, because my goal is to reach the people who need it. And so once I had that, I was like, oh, I have all the things that I can start creating for people that I need them to do. I needed the platform. Yeah. And like she expanded me. I need to see to believe how to do it. And so the way that they work is they're $68. So again, I always am like, 2 lunches with a girlfriend or dinners with a girlfriend.
So user-friendly.
So yeah, just easy, like
great aesthetic.
Thank you. And that was I was like, I want to make this so beta that there's no complication, that you just get in and you do the work when you have the time, because you'll get 2 months to do it. Yeah. And most of them are from 5 to 8 days of work of 20 to 30 minutes a day. And then I tell people, I encourage them to do it at their pace that feels right. But while you have those 2 months to go back through layers, and reparenting and shadow are the most important when it comes to manifestation. It's really learning what blocks are living in your subconscious, and a lot of them are in your shadow. So reparenting specifically takes you through all of the phases of childhood, through conception, utero, and it's basically telling you what you should have been developing as and receiving to be magnetic. And then it'll lead you through exercises of journaling, and then it's going to take you through my hypnosis process to really see what's living down there in the subconscious, because that's when it's forward and it won't lie to you. So it's really important to deal with what I said earlier, that we're manifesting that imprintation of 0 to 14 or a little bit later. And then shadow is really going to have you looking at specifically those aspects of self that you're rejecting. So like earlier, I talked about being like a hillbilly. That was a really triggering word for me because so much of my mission when I moved to LA was to like be chic and cool, and nobody could tell, and that nobody could tell I was poor when I was little. I really had rejected so many things about me that I was nothing but a shell, and my self-worth was so little. And if somebody ever discovered like that I didn't go to college or all these things about me, it was so debilitating because my self-worth was so tiny and hinged on this total shell I had put together. Like, duh, I wasn't manifesting anything. But when I started to integrate those really triggering aspects of hillbilly, poor, I mean, there's so many that have come up for me, and I really started to own them. It's like nobody could trigger me at this point with it. I have no shame around it anymore. My community knows, the world knows, own it. What we don't own owns us, and it will always have power over us. And it's also the biggest disservice because you're not your authentic self. You are hating your authentic self. That's what you're doing. And to be this magnetic person who's attracting in all the things you want, you need to become your wholer, authentic self. That should be the intention through your life, and that's what power is, and not power and egoic, like take over the world power. It's your own personal power, your generator, your aura that's projecting out. It's your power. It's not a masculine thing. It's a very beautiful and owned thing. So that's what it means. So those are the two biggest and most important. And then and another thing, everybody, they mostly, for the majority, come to me for money, career, partnership, like calling in their partnership, and home. So I was like, well, I would say, because my wait list is until September of 2018 right now for in-person sessions. Thank you. But I was also like, that's a big disservice to people. So I'm just going to make these as unblocked. So if you are trying to work on clarity in your career, or you have financial issues, go sign up for Opulence. It's $68, and it's going to walk you through all the things that I'm going to do with you in session. Like, it's going to have you go through and take inventory of the shame you picked up around money, and seeing what your subconscious beliefs are, where your physical blocks are, all that kind of beautiful stuff. And they're so explorative. You learn so much about yourself through these, where you're like, light bulb, I had no idea that I was operating on this on autopilot. So there's that. Relationships launching February 14th. So again, I mean, yes, sign up for a session after relationship if you're still feeling like you have individual questions. But most of the stuff pertaining to manifestation, the energetics of relationship, are going to be in that course. And it's literally $68.
And it's so accessible and user-friendly.
Thank
so
you.
glad that exists.
What were any, if you don't, maybe they're too personal to share, but what were any in reparenting big ones that came up for you?
Well, I think that this is funny because I wanted to talk about this anyway. I had a couple blocks from my own rigidity, or like, am I doing it right? Like, do I remember? Do I remember my childhood memories enough to do this? Oh, this is a huge one for me, Lacy. I would think about something else, and it would take me out of the deep imaging, or I'd get really tired and I'd fall asleep, or, all of these things, or I didn't do it the 8 days in a row, or, and I finally recently, just because I've talked to so many people who are my friends who are like, oh yeah, this Lacy, And I'm like, are you kidding? I love Lacy.
I'm like, people are going to be manifesting. It makes me so
no, it's great. There's like a whole crew of us.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's just the more people I've talked to, they're like, oh no, I didn't do it in the days, and it's fine. So I'd love if you could talk about that, because I feel like there's still a lot of unblocking and and I have such the personality that, when you ask me that question, I'm like, well, I don't know. I probably haven't unblocked enough. I probably need to keep unblocking. And I probably have, I know what my magnetic parents look like, but I'm not trying,
don't
all
worry.
These things. And I feel like I need to keep keep on it. So yeah, just maybe you could talk about that.
Great. Yeah, no, this is great. And those questions are universal. I need to like write them out somewhere on the blog, like support for Unblocked, because it can waste so much of your energy and time. And it's also a really good depiction of like where you are in your authentic power, because you're still questioning so many, which just means that you were probably raised with rigidity in some way, shape, or form. So you feel like if you're not perfect, you're not doing things correctly. But like number one, do it at your own pace and time. However, people who fall asleep because they are therapeutic. In fact, if I've been working with clients all day and I'm so out of my body and my nervous system is so strapped, I'll throw on one of those to take a nap, because it just takes you deep. But if you do find that you're falling asleep, I just tell people sit up in a chair. Like that's a great remedy to that. Also, people are like, but I don't have childhood memories. And I'm like, you do, but as a protection mechanism, even if you had a perfect childhood, we leave our bodies or we black out. That's two of our biggest defense mechanisms if we were sensitive as a child. So if you're doing this work, don't freak out if memories aren't coming up. This is what will start to loosen and unhinge them, because it's going to feel safe when you meet your magnetic parents. You're going to start to go, oh, okay. Because our subconscious, when we're in hypnosis, it can't tell the difference between what's real and not real. That's why it's so powerful for neuroplasticity. So when we start to give it these safer circumstances, it will unlock some of our memories. And all of a sudden we'll be driving 2 weeks later and we'll remember something that we've never remembered before.
Yes, that's happening.
I bet it's probably starting to unhinge. So that is so normal and okay. And I tell people like, there's no right way to do this. Like use those 2 months to come back around to it and see where you're at. There's no perfect way. And in fact, the more you can listen to your intuition throughout, the better. Another disclaimer that I need to write somewhere on the blog is the more relaxed you are when you go into a deep imagining, the more powerful and the more that will upheave the clarity. Meaning I'll do them after an Epsom salt bath or a massage or something that's really made me grounded and my nervous system calm, because it will allow everything to open up so much more in the subconscious.
That makes sense.
But if I'm spinning out from a day of work and I'm out of my body, my subconscious, it doesn't even open up, you know? So those, I just want to say, relax. Like, but I need to write this somewhere because people have these questions.
Right now, at least it's here.
Yes.
For me, when you asked what has come up, and this is something that I wanted to talk about anyway, but my biggest block and kind of thing I'm trying to reprogram and unblock, I guess, is around body image and my mom's relationship with her body and the things that I saw modeled for me in the media and everybody had all the things. Yeah, that is really starting. That is what I've mostly, and I thought, like I had the eating disorder, I had the recovering, I had this, and it's the most pervasive thing in my life, and that I've really seen there. And expanders, which I want to talk about, have helped me, and there's these things that have helped me, but it's still there. And it's something we talk about on the show every time, which I did write down to talk to you about. But could you talk about body image? I know your work doesn't focus on health things, but and even your personal relationship to your body and your body image.
Absolutely. So I have all the things. Like I grew up with the really pretty women. I think almost, and every person will kill me for saying this, but just as someone would feel that being overweight or anything that isn't the like atypical American, because we set the tone, standard of beauty. I think also being beautiful is just as big of a curse as not being beautiful, because when you're growing up, again, how we shouldn't be parenting children, but you're always your worth is always commented on how beautiful you are. And so therefore it becomes your sense of worth and your sense of security. So I think there are so many degrees on the spectrum. I think every woman's affected by body image. And I'm sure every single man is in a different way. It's such an epidemic in our Western society. And so for me, I had all the things. I've never had a full eating disorder, but I'm also growing up when you're a child of an alcoholic, you're a control freak. So you don't let yourself get out of control with anything. Like I've never blacked out drinking before, you're so controlling. And so for me, the ways that it manifested is that I would try every diet under the sun. And I think that that's actually what's contributed to most of my issues with my endocrine system. If you ever look at a woman who had like fertility, if they ever have fertility issues and you trace back, most of them have always yo-yoed and swinged with diets. And they didn't have a consistent diet of protein, fat, like nourishing fats to really, really nourish your hormones, and protein, which is obviously what builds everything in our body. So the way for me, especially having been an actress and a model, I would do there was one point where I was doing like a 500 calorie diet, which you could say is a form of anorexia, because I wanted to look like a ballerina's body. Yeah. It's such a mess. It's a mess. And in fact, like, anyone who's in wellness who has a voice or a blog, this is something that there needs to be a normalization around this.
That's what I try to do by talking about it.
It's so important, because I've never met a woman that doesn't have some form of this. Not one. It is an epidemic.
So pervasive.
So pervasive. It's terrible. And it's contributing to everything in our life, to our hormones, to manifesting.
Our mental clarity. Like that's Completely. What I think, the control and the sitting on your hands and the not going to the thing because you don't know about the food and you don't know of
Absolutely.
It's holding us back from what we could create in the world. Like I always say, like I could be the president if I would have
your version of whatever that is.
But I could do whatever I wanted in the world if the amount of energy I took to counting and strategizing and controlling all these different diets
and fashion, like it's just such a mess. So for me personally, I work on this mostly through expanders are my biggest ways. And I'm pretty diligent about it. So
let's define what an expander is too, because I think we forgot to do that.
Absolutely. So in my process, when you read in a manifestation book that's visualize what you want and it will come, I tell people that doesn't work because it's in the conscious mind. And again, we're manifesting from the structure of belief from childhood. So if there's something you're wanting that you didn't grow up believing and seeing that you could have, it's not coming through because there isn't space for it. So you have to actually go into the world and find expanders, what I call seeing as believings or expanders, meaning that you relate to this other individual or thing enough and that they have what you want. Therefore, your subconscious through mirror neurons registers, oh, well, they have that. I can have it too.
It's possible.
It's possible. And that's what creates space in your subconscious for this actual manifestation to come through. And you'll want a couple of them, especially. Though I always say the lower your self-worth is to the thing you're calling in, meaning on a subconscious level, the more you believe you can never have it, the more expanders you're going to need that reflect something you recognize of yourself. So meaning if you look at them and you're like, oh, well, they come from money or they're pretty or whatever, that's why they could have it and I can't because of X, Y, and Z, they're not your expander. You can also pick up fragment expanders, meaning they don't have the whole picture of what you want, but they have tiny little puzzle pieces of it. So that's kind of what expanders are. And you can learn more about that in the Formula of Magnetism workshop. But I'll give you an example in body image for me. The two things that have been the most successful for me, three things in body image, have been deprogramming shame. The more I do that, the more worthy I feel in general in my own skin.
Can you talk about that more?
Yeah. So a lot to do with shadow and a lot to do with inner child. Okay. The more I go through and I own and I heal whatever was down below and I expand it, the more I just get comfortable in my own body, the more worthy I feel. The second part is expander. I'll say first, because I'll go into expanders. The second part has also been being in relationship, because it's another different type of mirror neuron with someone who loves me no matter what I'm at.
Yeah, without knowing that is
huge.
Me. So,
it's so healing.
Yep.
Because I'm not having to be something that I'm not. I'm loved for exactly who I am, wherever I'm at and how I am.
Yeah,
so that's
and you're being seen.
It is. It's a form of your mirror neurons are registering. I'm accepted. Therefore, on a subconscious level, you're accepting yourself where you don't have it. So that's been very healing, because I've been in relationships in the past with people who also have their own low self-worth, right? Because wherever they're projecting it onto you, you're feeling unworthy. So I've been with people in the past where I can tell, like, when they think I'm bloated and and you just, like, if you're with someone who's reinforcing that, it's not your ideal partnership. It's not going to be what expands you. And then the third have been expanders. And I'll give an example of that. So, of course, as women in Western society, we're growing up around MTV, so TV, magazines, fashion, models, and with that, we're then taking on a shitload of, insecurities and problems and subconscious low self-worth. So one of mine, I'll just give like one example of something, and I've had to do pieces of my body.
Are those media, is the media like accidental expanders?
They can be in different ways. I think like the way I don't say that they're expanding. I say that it's more of a reinforcement of what's insecure. I say modeling, like it can be shame modeling, because I don't want to confuse it of what's creating space, because it's actually limiting space and what's possible for you. Okay. But yeah, your mirror neurons are registering, your limbic brain is registering, like, that's how I should be. If I'm like that, I'll be loved and everybody in society will want me. Yeah. Exactly. So it's moving you further away from your authentic self. It's a shame. Yeah. And so for me, one of my big things was freckles. I have freckles all over my body. And I just I was so insecure about it, so shameful, especially with acting. I even had a manager this really, really well-known, successful manager who was representing me say, because on my arm, there's like a sun birthmark kind of a thing that's like a constellation.
I have a really similar one on my leg.
Do you?
Yeah, I'll show you.
And I always liked it.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Thank
I have
you.
almost like the identical birthmark.
How funny. Us fair people. And she was like, yeah, I have just the person who can laser that off and you'll start getting more work. And she also told me, like, get a boob job, you'll start getting more work. So it was like it's such a terrible environment for women. But I had to do a lot of expanding around that. Meaning, one day I sat down and I was like, I'm going to find every like societal accepted beautiful woman who has freckles all over her body that is stunning. So it would be like Julianne Moore models. And I started to find all these people and show my subconscious how fucking rad it is to have freckles all over your body. Yes. And then it just became this, like, it's kind of like a French energy where it became like this beautiful, unique thing about me. And I've had to do that with many parts of my body, even though, and I'm fully aware of this, my body, my physical human suit is societally beautifully accepted. I've had to work through so much of my stuff, and expanders are so, so powerful for that, especially when it comes to aging. I'll go and find all of these other women who are aging gracefully that I identify with, and how cool through their style and accessories and their lipstick and stuff that they dress it up, So
I even sneakily take photos in New York City. This is very creepy, of women who I'm just like, yes, that is what I want when I'm 60. Or whatever. Like I have them on my phone and I like put them in a folder. My friend and I had this, my friend Val, who's on the podcast, we'll send them back and forth to each other.
You guys have to start an Instagram.
Yeah.
Like how to expand people through aging. Yes. This would be so helpful for people with body image issues.
Okay. It's so funny when you said that about going back to the body image expanders. I've been talking about that, not with that language, but on the podcast for years, because in eating disorder recovery, they tell you that the only proven way to improve body image is through looking at bodies your size or bigger that you find. It's called exposure therapy.
Beautiful.
And exposure therapy is the only proven way to improve body image. So it's actually a method of healing where they ask you to, even if you look at them and this is what it was like for me, and you're like, oh, gross, I don't want to look like that because it's someone bigger than you and you're not there yet mentally. Even if you like find it grotesque and you don't like it, it doesn't even matter. Just by looking at it again and again, you become more comfortable with it.
Absolutely.
Because what you see in the mirror, then, you know, if that's something in your, because all day long we're seeing images of people smaller than us or people Photoshopped, whatever, all the things. And then that way, you know, a week later, you could be looking at yourself in the mirror and be like, well, I at least recognize this. You know, I recognize the way that my butt, I guess I can kind of find it cute because I liked it on this other girl, or I at least saw it.
Absolutely. Reflected.
That's why it's so important to see ourselves
mirror
in the
neuron
media.
work.
Yeah.
See, that's beautiful. See, I don't even know that they're doing that in therapeutic.
Yeah. Like, and it's like, but you just uncovered it and have different language for this thing.
Yeah. It's totally that, but that is so helpful for people.
And it's been proven by science, exactly like your term expanders.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And
well, speaking of expanders, I wrote down to touch on envy. You have a great blog post that I recently read when I was preparing for this, and you make this great distinction between envy and jealousy, and you talk about how envy is related to expanders. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I think people like starting to learn how we can identify our emotions. Again, that's why, and I don't want to harp on this too much, but it is so important when we move away from the rhetoric of think positive, we're actually getting into a very constructive zone, because the more we can start to identify our emotions, they're actually the roadmap that shows us where we need to do the work. They're like the biggest key holders of where we have limiting beliefs and where we're triggered. There's something down there that's blocking our manifestation. So that's why it's so important. And I think people get jealousy and envy confused a lot, because jealousy, like in a very, like the energy of it is there's something that you're afraid you're going to lose. But with envy, it's actually what you're confused about. Something else possesses something you want. So it's like when you can identify the difference, if you're jealous and there's something you're afraid you're going to lose, there's work to do on that, right? Because there's a scarcity there. Yeah. That usually means in childhood, things were taken away from you or you were abandoned. So you need to do work because that's a block that's, could be blocking you from relationships or whatever. But when you move into, really working with envy, which really gets into that component of all you're doing, it's shadow work too. You're just witnessing something that you want and you're afraid you'll never have. That's what you're feeling when you feel that. So there's work. That's something you can work with. So most importantly, when we get over the normal human emotion of envy, where you have that freak out and that tensity and that fear rise up in you, or all the stuff that comes up in you, when you can move past that and you start to look at, they just have something I want. They're just showing me that exists. They become an expander for you. Mm. You start to see, to believe what's possible. So I always tell people, the moment you feel triggered through envy, don't just walk away from that energy. Yeah. Use this. Look at what they have, what they represent, and start to map out. There's a great post everybody can go, as you said, go look at it. Yeah, but there's journaling work you can do around that, and you can start to look at, well, what is it that I want that they have, and what do I need expanding on deeper? Work with that energy. Yeah. And that's why I tell people, when you're triggered, don't just let it fly by you. When you get pissed or you're sad or you feel desperate or those things, they are so beautiful. They're coming up to show you where a block is. So it's please use that energy. And in the Formula and Magnetism workshop, you learn a daily 15-minute a day exercise where you take that energy and you find clarity of what it's representing. And then you go and do the really quick hypnotic work to reprogram it. So that's where I'm please welcome your negative emotions. Yeah. They are your roadmap.
Yeah. That was a huge watershed moment for me. And this is something I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, and I want to make sure I hit all that. I'm putting pennies in the jukebox that is Lacy Phillips, and I want you to hit all of these notes. But I wrote my book, which I brought you a copy of. It's all about journaling, excited. And journaling is such a huge part of your work. Expressive writing. Can you talk about how that's been in your life? It sounds like it's something that you've been doing, long before you even got into manifestation in the terms that you do now, and why is it so helpful in this?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I've been journaling. My first acting class, they taught you like journal every single day.
Oh, like
they
morning
didn't give
pages?
what is it?
Like morning pages?
Totally. They didn't give a real reason why in acting, but I think they were trying to start to have us become emotionally intelligent so that we could really understand the emotion of a character we're playing. So I've been journaling since I was like 17, pretty much daily. But for me, I like to tell people like journaling is a really big process because it's a way that our mirror neurons can really clearly totally register and work out what's going on. So when we just have like our thoughts going haywire and like blah, 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 and stuff moving all over, journaling is a really beautiful way to ground and start to me, it's like long division when I journal.
Yeah.
It's how I uncover what's up.
Yes.
It allows me to get that clarity along the way. So that's why so much of my work are journaling prompts where they're like, go deeper, go deeper.
Yeah.
Like I want you to go deeper. So it's more to me, long division of getting that crystal clarity of what that bottom root trigger is. So it's more, for me, it's less about therapy and more about discovery, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I love that. Gratitude. Where does that play into all of this? In the Hicks work, it's such a huge part of it.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear you speak on that.
So like gratitude, just as a simple energy, of course, anytime we're living in gratitude, it's projecting out something that people want to be around. It, however, is not what's determining what you're manifesting. And that's why I stay away from it in my work, because it can be a crutch for people. People who don't want to do work, if they just want to think positive and write their gratitude list every day, it's a beautiful spiritual and soul nourishing exercise. And I'm all for living in gratitude. I do a lot of gratitude practices myself, but I don't want it to be misconstrued with manifestation, because gratitude does not. I know that there's Rumi quotes on this. And I mean, again, I lived in that for a long time where gratitude, I thought that was what was going to do it. That was what was going to make me manifest, and it wasn't. So I try to steer clear of it, but I love when people have a gratitude practice. I think gratitude brings more joy in your life. It brings more happiness. It brings more awareness of what you do have. Like
Proven. Yeah.
Totally.
Another thing similar to gratitude that I just thought of right now with the Hicks work was so pervasive was the assume the energy of what you want before you have it.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
So like I just put out my YouTube video on this, which is hold the frequency. I love to make fun of this one because my 2 cents on it, and I'll summarize what the YouTube video was about, is the more that programs like that, books like that ask us to be something that we're not, we're actually delaying our manifestations because we're exhausting more energy getting away from our authentic self than honoring our authenticness and projecting that out in a powerful state. So for me, I've done it all. Like when I was calling in relationships, I would
fake it till you make it.
Fake it till I would make. All that it was egoic. Like if I was calling in partnership, I would like dress up the other side of the bed and like make it like they're already there, and play
pretend.
Like the secret would even have you like wear a wedding ring, like if you wanted marriage and all of this stuff. And like somebody please write in and tell me if that really was what. And even in the YouTube video, I have people like bring to mind, and I'll ask them, and we can do it here where, you just close your eyes and you just bring to mind right now the biggest manifestation, the most kismet thing you've ever manifested before. And I'll just give people a second to do that. And if that's come, I want you to look maybe the year, 2 years leading up to it. Were you able to hold that frequency of positivity the whole time? Did you break that belief that like, it's coming, I'm going to fake it, it's here?
Yeah.
We're human.
Can I give my example?
Yes, of course. People will learn from it.
So mine was my book deal. Like I was like, I want it to be Hay House, and I want Gabby Bernstein to write my foreword. And this was like what I so wanted 5 years ago. It was like everything. But I had no idea how that was going to happen. And it came to me when I just like didn't care anymore.
Yeah. And you're just authentically you, like in your power.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was cool. And it's so who I was, 5 years ago. But now it's like, I want the next thing. And, you just are like,
yes,
you feel far from it. But It wasn't like I was I didn't do any of the things. It just kind of came to me.
Totally. And that's what I like to tell people. Like, I'm sure too, if you really sat down and mapped out that experience, there's things you did to step into your power, and to jump off of cliffs you were afraid of that created magnetism. But I'm sure it wasn't because you faked it until you made it. I'm just like, I'm yet to really meet that. It's just, it's humanly impossible to hold that frequency or to be that thing entirely. And more importantly, it's another version of stuffing everything down. It's going to all come up in a different way. That's not healthy. When you have, it's like the person, and I have this a lot in my practice, who has all the money, they have the dream job, they have the relationship they thought they wanted, all the things. And they're like, why am I not happy now? When they finally have received all the things. And it's like, because you have all of these things inside of you you haven't addressed. Like, you need to work through that. You need to get rid of that.
And maybe it's not even what you want because it's not, you've been manifesting from this shell.
Totally.
Like,
that's exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, those people, it's so interesting. I have one client she's wonderful, but she is from Venezuela, and her whole programming she grew up with when she was little. She wanted to be a famous singer when she was little and had a beautiful voice. And her single mom, who had all this programming, was like really grooming her to become like something very big and safe, like a lawyer or this or that. And also was so unhealthy because the mom's whole objective was like, you need to go to the popular parties, you need to be in the press. Like, it was all about this stuff. Guess what she manifested? Like, she came from Venezuela, did her undergrad at Harvard, went to Harvard Law School, became a lawyer, and did all the things. And then she had her first baby, or I think it was her second, and was like, I'm really fucking unhappy. I've always wanted to be in the arts. And then she switched over and she became an incredible, she's a really big art advisor. But it shows you like how that was her structure of belief growing up, and she manifested it all. But guess what it brought her? A shit ton of unhappiness, you know, but she lived out her programming and her mom's dreams.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's an example of that.
This stuff is so fascinating. I wrote down the word labels because you have this great blog post about how counterproductive and repressive labels are. And I would love if you could address that on the podcast, and, you know, why, which I know is a question that if this is new to people or people listening to this information are likely to have, of, you know, why do bad things happen to people when it comes to manifesting, and why are there are people repressed and in poverty?
Absolutely. And so I was getting that question a lot, and I obviously could only answer it from my own philosophies. And so in the article, I really
I'll
lay
link
out
to that too.
Yeah, you guys can read. It's really, it's like my clear, like decisive answer on that. But like, luckily, I always say this. I'm like, why was I put into this body with this message? Like, why do I have to seem like a white privileged chick talking about how to get everything in your life? It fucking sucks. Like, I mean, I just wish I could have a little bit more diversity on all fronts with that. But the one thing I do know is, and I lay this out,
it wouldn't be authentic.
It wouldn't be authentic.
It wouldn't work.
Like, the only one who's done that, I mean, there's been so many activists and so many wonderful people, but like Oprah really has it all. You know, she can really, she can translate to almost anyone. And it's so beautiful to watch that with her. And so, and it's because she comes from every type of shame, pain, underdog experience you can have. So it is really beautiful to have her on the forefront of so many movements. But so for me, like, I lay it out. Like, again, everybody, you know, has heard my story on here, but I really don't come from a white privilege background by any means. And so it was when I wrote the article mainly to empower anyone from any socioeconomic background, from any cultural background, because my main message is you can manifest if you're willing to step up and deprogram everything you've learned in your life, especially the more repressed you've been. And so through that, I go through and talk about an experience I had in Colombia a few years ago. And I was there, and it's when I was kind of really starting to step into this work and know that I had to put my foot into it. And I was with this very, very beautiful spiritual woman there. And we were all having tacos one day, and this poor village in the country, and a guy pulls up and he's in a Ferrari and he like parks all lopsided, and you just like a lot of machismo, and he like orders his tacos and all the things. And it just really, when you're in second and third world countries, things like that trigger you much greater than like being in Beverly Hills, right? Like you just see the true contrast and juxtapose or juxtaposition. I don't know what to call it. So we got home later that night and we went out to dinner, and something sparked in conversation. And I was like, I brought him up and I was like, but why? Like, that guy has that stupid car. I've obviously never been into cars, but he has that stupid car and he could like help so many people in this village. And the woman looked at me and she said, Lacy, you're going to have this all figured out, like in terms of manifestation and stuff, when you stop seeing the car and you start to see every car is the same car. And it took me forever to philosophize on that. And then it came out later too, that he's a huge, huge singer in the country who does so much I don't know why I can't speak tonight, but philanthropic work.
It's been a long time. I've been jumbling my words all night, so I'm probably contagious. Like, we're neurons.
Totally, exactly. We'll just start speaking another language soon. But he does so much for his country. Everyone loves him. He's a really beautiful and big person. And I had to philosophize that for a long time. And I was like, it finally hit me one day. I was like, she is so right. Like, the more I started to manifest and more abundance and more dreams were coming true, when I stopped seeing the car, the labels, the differences, and I started seeing everything as the same, that's when I could energetically see the energetics so clearly of what goes on in the world. And so like the biggest thing when people are like, why do bad things happen to people? I will never be able to answer that. Nobody will ever be able to answer that in this lifetime for us. But my philosophy on that, it's fascinating when I have women who come to me who have been sexually abused. 95 to 98% of the time, so were their mothers. And half the time their mothers would say, it's just what happens. I believe in things like epigenetics. I believe in a collective consciousness and programming when you're being raised. So if you're growing up in an impoverished country where you're repressed and your whole belief system and programming is that you aren't good enough, you can't have, you won't be, you're already naturally projecting that into the world. Therefore, when I've worked with plenty of clients who immigrated to this country or to other countries, and then they go and they start to see through expanders what is possible, and they start deprogramming and they just start manifesting stuff that they want. So for me, I'm a big proponent of not buying into labels, things like privileged or non-privileged or I'm so far beyond, not to say I'm greater or more enlightened, but my viewpoint, I think the conversation needs to get a whole lot bigger than what we're focusing on today.
Yes.
Like when we're focusing on feminism, again, yes, I'm a feminist at heart. I believe in equal rights, but like, God, my vision's so much bigger than being a feminist.
Yeah.
I'm
different. Like we're not, men and women aren't the same.
Totally. I'm like, everyone needs healing. Like to me, I'm like, the bigger picture is true magnetism. When we're just talking about energetics, like the way that I read energy, it's the in-between space. It's where light meets dark. It's where masculine meets feminine. It's where good meets bad. All the things. It's that polarity is magnetic energy. So when I'm looking at stuff, for instance, Aries, in my practice, Aries are the quickest manifestors if they're unblocked because they inhabit that. Most of like the Aries women I know are bisexual. They don't adhere to masculine and femininity as much. They're more in that abstract in-between area. So they can play with that more undefined space. So when I'm looking at like the greater picture, I'm like, who cares about like people's sexuality? I'm for like all genders, all races, all like sexual orientations. When you start to take off labels of privilege, unprivileged, socioeconomic, this, that, religion, sexuality, you start to deprogram all of that. Bodies, like that's when you're getting really conscious.
Yeah.
That space is where anything's possible. So I'm not a huge proponent into buying into cultural labels. It's just such bullshit.
Preach. I'm so glad we got that in this podcast. I think for understanding and implementing this work, to have that knowledge of answering that question helps it all kind of go right in, you know, without the filter. One more thing I wrote down that speaks to, and I want to get to some fun quick fire questions. I would love, we addressed this a bit, but lack of clarity. So many of the questions that came in on my phone and in the Facebook group were talking about not having your purpose being all the way clear, knowing a bit about your purpose and what you want, and knowing you want, like we were saying at the beginning, and I relate to that so much, of knowing you want it to be something really big and some things are coming into alignment, but just having that lack of clarity.
Absolutely. So like what I want to direct everyone towards, there's a few resources. There's a blog called Clarity Takes Time. There's a blog post on that in the blog. There's also, like I said, if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll already get a deep imagining that starts asking your subconscious and some, you know, exercises around that.
That'll all be in the show notes.
Perfect. But in terms of clarity, and everyone's like, do I need to know what I want to manifest before I do this work? And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, even in the Formula and Magnetism workshop, you're going to learn, even if you have clues, that's all you need in order to start calling in. Even if you don't know what the clear picture is yet, let's say career, but you know that it is in this field maybe, or it has white walls, or employees that are nice to you, or that you live in this city maybe, or these 3 different types of cities. The clues are all you need to start feeding to the universe and co-creating.
So the Formula and Magnetism, sorry to interrupt. I just want to mention that for people listening. I'll link to that in the show notes. But that, if you've been listening to this podcast and any of these concepts that we're talking about are relating to you, which they probably are, because they sure relate to me, and you've been taking notes, what breaks this down really organized really well is this video series that Lacy has called The Formula and Magnetism.
Yeah.
And that's available all the time?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so
anytime.
We'll
and you
link
get
to
4
that.
months to work through it. But that'll start helping you. And
so that's what she was talking about.
Yeah. And clarity at the end of the day, if you're not clear yet, you're not supposed to be. And that is okay. You're right where you're supposed to be. And I know when we live in like the human experience where there is such thing as time and space, it's really frustrating, especially when we're in a culture that really reinforces success and needing to be clear. But at the end of the day, like, you are picking up the tools the lessons, most importantly, that you're supposed to be learning right now. So yes, like, there are exercises you can do on clarity and tips you can do on clarity. And my new work of authenticity will have stuff like that. But still, at the end of the day, the most important message I want to impart is, if you're not clear, awesome. Like, some of the most interesting people I've worked with who are older and they're like doing a whole new thing in their life, didn't have clarity, and they ended up manifesting the most interesting the most interesting different things they could have never imagined. So it's like being open to the possibility, but starting to really tune in to your preference, your intuition, and opening up what possibility exists while being right where you're supposed to be is actually really, really, really special.
Oh, I love that. If you don't have clarity, you're not supposed to.
Absolutely.
So good.
And don't don't book a session if you don't have clarity with me. Do the other stuff. Obviously, it's a far less investment, but also I can't tell you, and I hope you're not going to a psychic to try and get clarity, because that could really limit your potential.
Unblock, and it'll come to you.
Dude, the more you get rid of what's not serving you, like in the subconscious and the physical level, the more things you just want and naturally desire and like are going to start showing up in your life, especially if you're expanding through expanders. So if you're having trouble with clarity, unblock, expand, and also actionably, and unblock no teaches you this, actionably really starting to step into what you want, meaning like what makes you happy and what serves you, and letting go of what doesn't. It's enough to start drawing in things to you where the universe is like, ooh, let's send them more clear. They're stepping into their authenticness.
So you say in the Formula workshop that it's better to focus on a material thing first to try. Yeah. And I was having trouble with that. I was like, I mean, I want these Jessie Can pants, but like, I think I can just probably buy them. Yeah. Like I was like, I didn't have like a specific clear thing. Like, could I do a work thing?
Absolutely.
Like,
You can call it a new apartment thing.
So
like, It can be anything, but it's harder when people are like, a better relationship with myself. They can't, if you have something like more in the physical plane, you can actually like learn the steps better and deeper, and then move on to how that can be applicable, and you can plug it in to more abstract things like that.
Cool.
But yeah, it can be anything material, you know, a relation, like anything you're wanting to work on.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's my next thing that I'm like, excited. It's so jazzed to dive into. It'll be like a nice cozy winter.
Oh, it's
thing to get
and
into.
like to really start calling in the things you're wanting.
Yeah, I'm excited. I heard you talking about in another podcast about expanders that you have had from TV and movies. And when I was younger, I was like in middle school and I was watching the OC. Do you remember that show?
Totally remember it. Totally remember.
And I was obsessed with Seth Cohen.
Oh, like, he was magic.
He was the best.
Yeah, totally.
And I was like totally obsessed with him.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend and I met in this like very kismet way. And the first thing I thought was like, oh, that guy kind of reminds me of Seth Cohen.
That Seth Cohen expanded you.
Isn't that funny?
You know what's so funny about this? Like I'll have clients, and I say TVs are amazing places for expanding all the time. There's two reasons. One, when we're watching TV, we're in a hypnotic state. So we're already like in hypnosis, meaning our subconscious comes forward and it can't tell what's real or not real. So when you're seeing like Seth Cohen and Rachel Bilson having a relationship on it, and you're like, I like that, or he's totally attractive, he's a thing, your subconscious is registering that that's possible for you.
Okay, what about once you have manifested a relationship and you're in the relationship, what is your greatest lesson on maintaining and being in a healthy partnership?
And, you know, here's like something I always want to impart on people. Everyone thinks when you manifest something, it's happily ever after. That's like, that's what makes it the cure all. That's why people seek it. Never, ever, ever is that the case. Like if we take away the human body, the human experience, time and space, and we just go into energy, the reason why things are coming into our life is to knock us into our authentic selves. But the universe is going to send you what will catch your attention the most, to be your mirror, to mirror back to you where you're needing to get into your own authenticness. So meaning if you're in relation, if you attract in the partner and you get them, it is not happily ever after, ever. You guys have attracted each other to be mirrors of each other, of what needs to be deprogrammed, what blocks need to be unblocked, how to evolve and come more into your authentic self. So I always like to tell people when you're in relationship, I mean, there are all the things that we all know, communication's key, trust is everything, that they make you feel safe, and like all those things that's all healthy partnership. But on a manifestation level, I always ask people to stop focusing so much on what the other person needs to change and they're your mirror. What you're projecting, you're receiving. So meaning that do like in the formula magnetism workshop, that exercise, when your partner triggers you, don't let that energy go and don't blame them. Start to look at what about you it's projecting that's receiving that behavior back, meaning what low self-worth thing, like what's making you be able to be pushed around or manipulated or all the things. That's what the beauty of being in partnerships all about, is how much they can reflect to you that you need to shift to get into your authentic power.
Yeah, and it helps you grow, and it's not always comfortable.
Not at all. And I'll do stuff all the time where I won't even have conversations with my partner. He'll trigger me and I'll be feeling insecure, and then I'll go and do the journaling work and I'll do the reprogramming and I'll go, oh my God, when I was little, like my partner, if he's been treating me where I'm like, am I just, like a trophy to this person? And this isn't the case in this current partnership. But when I do the work on it, I'll go, oh, fascinating. When I was little and the memory will pop up and all the things, my parents had me and I was basically just a doll for them to play with. They didn't really see me all the way and engage in me on the right level. It's not crazy that I'm projecting and receiving that in this relationship. And when I start to shift that, all of a sudden our dynamic will fully change in our relationship. So I'm like, focus less on the partner and start using that as your mirror to take accountability and change.
Yeah. Oh,
and your relationship starts changing.
Yeah.
And then if there's someone who can't honor that work and that shift, maybe they're not the right partner. What makes me successful at what I do is because I come from nothing. I went through every rock bottom you can imagine. And I have a really weird gift of energy and patterning, of being able to decode it. And then when you find the formula, like that, anyone can learn a formula.
And also, you forgot a bunch of things. You're also really articulate and magnetic and beautiful and like all these things. But
thank you so much. But like anyone without those could do this with the formula, but unless they really understand the bottoms of things, so how deep the threshold is. When you've gone through a rock bottom, like when a client's in it, I love it because they're experiencing how low they can go and how much they can trust the universe. Meaning, like, if they're the brokest they've ever been and they've lost everything, that fear's gone. It's no longer going to be a fear again of like, what if because that's what stops us so much from doing stuff is like, oh my God, I've never been single. What if this person leaves me? And who am I? Once you face that fear, you're like, oh, fuck it. I'm so empowered. Your threshold gets a lot greater. So that's why, like, people I train, teacher trainings, like they're going to have been through those things. They have to understand energy. So I can teach that to them on a deeper level. So it's tricky, like having to hold that and find those people who can really, because like, obviously I'm result based. Like I share testimonials constantly. Like that's really my thing. I want people manifesting. It's not like Anastasia where you can teach anyone to do a brow, you know, like there's so which that is the model, right? Like you have all these people working under you, and that's the model that makes it financially successful. But for me, it'll have to be different. You have to pick people and groom them.
And I can tell you're so authentic that to put your name onto anything, it's going to have to be.
They have to be able to be successful.
Well, I was super curious about that. I have 10 million more questions that I could ask you and that other people asked you, but we've been talking for a million years. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, we did. And in case you're not totally ready to join the pathway yet, I wanted to share a few of our free offerings that I'll often suggest to people as a little bit of a blueprint to get them started on their manifestation journey. The first place I like to direct people completely for free is the motivation. You can see it linked below or on our homepage as our testimony library. And it's categorized by different subjects, whether you're calling in career, money, love, wellness, and much more. When you're reading about a member's experience of what they manifested, you're actually seeing to believe and showing your subconscious that that very thing is possible for you. The second place I like to direct people is to the free clarity exercise, which is also linked below. In it, you get to try our own unique hypnosis process, learn about the science, and some journaling prompts. And the best part about this, you'll get a tiny taste of what it's like to go into your hypnotic state, bring your subconscious forward, and create new neural pathways while receiving clarity. And the third thing, if you haven't listened to it on this podcast yet, please go back to the episode titled Manifestation 101, where you'll learn the basics of neural manifestation to truly understand this process. So go ahead and check out those free resources, the motivation, the free clarity exercise, and the episode Manifestation 101, all linked below. And in an effort to make sure to have representation in this process series, go ahead and submit any process testimonials you have, especially to our LGBTQ+ community, our BIPOC, as well as the Ys, which is anyone in the community who is 45 and over. All right, we'll be back next week.